CountryWide CONNECT, connecting farmers and growers to what they need to know to grow. Your daily innovative rural show with Andy Thompson and Sarah Perriam-Lampp.
So sitting in studio with us now is the chair of LIC, Corrigan Sowman and Golden Bay dairy farmer. Corrigan, welcome into CountryWide CONNECT and thank you for coming straight off the plane and straight into the studio. Would you mind just working a wee bit closer?
Thank you.
Amazing, amazing. So what are you doing in Christchurch?
I'm at the side event this afternoon and tomorrow, which is always a pretty special occasion. Just actually reflecting, Sarah, it was 13 years ago in June I chaired side. So I've been involved on and off with that event for many years, and great initiative.
Yeah, absolutely. And what will you be covering in regards to your talk?
So the theme of the overall event is about turning knowledge into value. And the topic for this afternoon for three of us is around gene technologies. So quite an interesting topic around legislation, potential legislation change, understanding from a farmer perspective what those technologies could mean inside businesses. And I'm not here in necessarily an LIC capacity this afternoon, but as a farmer, just thinking about how do we sort of unpack what technology change could mean for us, how do we assess it, how do we build our understanding, our curiosity, etc. on the subject. So yeah, should be cool.
Corrigan, a very interesting topic because I follow this quite closely, this gene tech, GMO, all of that technology that's being talked about. And I almost universally hear from people who are against it, from farmers for lots and lots of reasons. They're against it, and I don't necessarily believe in a lot of the reasons that they're against it, but I appreciate their point of view. You would hear the same things, but do you hear from farmers who are actually for it, for the gene tech?
It's a good question, Andy. Maybe you're moving in circles where you're talking about it more often than I am. I think the farmers that I do hear from are quick to identify trade risk and acknowledge where our brand sits in the world, and that anything that we do needs to think about that carefully. But on the positive side, those that I think are generally inquisitive about it are recognising the changes that are occurring around us, not only in our own climate, but globally in the subject matter, and that perhaps countries and geographically regions in the world that would have typically been very opposed to these sorts of things are actually starting to become a bit more permissive in their regulation, and considering when you trade off things like environment, climate, and genuine food security, that these sorts of things need to be looked at. And also, and we'll hear today from other scientists, not me, but this technology is advancing just so rapidly, and how precise it is, and what it, there's a big wide range, as you well know, between necessarily changing something and manipulating an organism a little bit in terms of how its genes are expressed.
Exactly. And sorry, Sarah, I was just going to say, and that's part of the problem. I think it's more of a selling. I think it's there's not enough information out there. People still think that GMO is, to use a phrase, that horrible image of a syringe into a tomato, whereas something like CRISPR-Cas9 is just about turning a gene on and off. It's a completely different technology. And I think if it was explained better in a lot of ways, that perceived risk that we get when you talked about implications on trade and the organics organisation, trade and all that sort of thing, probably goes away, but it just doesn't seem to hit through doesn't seem to get through to the people that need to hear it.
No, that's right.
Yeah. Now, Andy, we also wanted to take the opportunity to have Corrigan in here because he contributed a great article to CountryWide's Autumn's Cooperatives Special Report. The cooperative model is unique globally and of envy from other countries around how we structure our agricultural sector. Your topic really focused on the generational importance of cooperatives. Obviously, you are wearing the LIC badge now when you were talking about this.
That I am.
What was the article about, and what were you trying to get across?
I think partly it's reflecting who LIC is a cooperative, and obviously we've got a range of those cooperatives in New Zealand. But the key for our cooperative in terms of the genetics business, the testing business, the data business that we're in, is a deep reflection on the fact that that's taken a very long time to build, and the decisions that we make today won't show up, for many years into the future. And I actually brought along a little bit of an artifact to kind of show today, which is something quite dear to me, which is the 1939, 38 herd testing records for the herd that became the herd on our farm.
It's pretty impressive. I'm going to take a photo of this, so it'll be on screen if you're watching this on YouTube. For those who are listening on podcast, can you sort of explain what we're looking at?
Yeah, so I guess the reason I partly brought it along is in touching on this generational piece is that as farmers, we've had to record information for a very long period of time to get to where we are today in terms of those things that we kind of enjoy and now take for granted. And so farmers back then, they didn't have an LIC, but they'd formed these herd testing associations so they could understand what were their best and their worst cows. And I think we might have talked about this before, but back in the late sort of 1930s, the New Zealand government had recognised that New Zealand wasn't in a great position, and dairy had a lot to contribute to New Zealand's future. And so it commissioned a royal inquiry to better understand that. And the outcomes of that were the National Herd Improvement Plan, and that ultimately became LIC. So it's pretty cool to sort of think, 80, 90 years ago, we were thinking about where we wanted to be today, about the potential that the sector had to contribute to New Zealand's economy, and what were the steps that we sort of needed to put in place in order to do that. So when I go back to that article, that's what generational co-op is. It's, we've taken a long time to get to where we are today, and these decisions they'll mean a lot for the future as well.
Mm.
Those the far-sightedness of that back in the 1930s, to see that we need to set that up and do that speaks volumes, I think, to those people. We see that in some of those archives that we've got, Sarah?
With the dairy exporters.
The dairy exporters. Corrigan, I guess as we move through this, there's a lot of pressure on co-ops, and a lot of it has been done to do with, I suppose, capital. Is that something that LIC is struggling with or working through? I think that's been a big problem.
And I think, in your publication does a good job of really outlining all the differences there are in cooperatives and the different roles they have in our sector. I think some friendship of the genetic potential that we can have here in New Zealand, and reflecting on that fact that only 5% of global milk is produced off pasture. So, we need quite a unique set of genetics here in New Zealand to deliver. So we've always, I think, had an approach, and sometimes we've drifted from that and we've learned, but is to have a balance sheet that's strong, and a balance sheet that can allow us to continue to replenish effectively our R&D pipeline for the future. So typically LIC hasn't tended to have, a particularly large amount of debt, or if it has, it's been thinking about it very carefully in relation to sort of growing its portfolio of services, and probably particularly over the last sort of 5 to 10 years as a business, we've looked carefully at, like a lot of cooperatives, what is our core purpose? What are the things that we really do every day to deliver value to farmers? And what are those things that sit maybe adjacent to it, but aren't necessarily best owned by LIC as a cooperative? And we've divested from those. So now very much we are focused on the knitting, so to speak, which is the genetics, the testing, and the data.
Yeah. It's a privilege to have you in the studio, Corrigan. Thank you so very, very much. And if you are heading along to Side today, you are speaking, or tomorrow?
Yes, late this afternoon I'm speaking,
Yep. So there'll be a lot of people that are listening into this that would be heading along to the South Island Dairy event. Thank you very much for your contribution to the Countrywide autumn publication. working on winter at the moment. I had to double check. And of course, for joining us in studio. Let us know next time you're down, because it would be awesome to have you in.
Yeah, thanks. My pleasure. Thanks for having me today. Good to see you too, Andy.
CountryWide Connect, connecting farmers and growers to what they need to know to grow. Your daily innovative rural show with Andy Thompson and Sarah Perriam-Lampp.